My parents always overlooked me. On my 21st birthday, they gifted my brother a watch. I walked out that night. My dad called 2 weeks later. Please come home. Can you imagine your own family trying to erase you? Not just forget you, but actively wipe out any trace you ever existed? Because that's exactly what mine tried to do, and the day I truly understood it, everything changed. It was a betrayal so deep, it forced me to fight for a life I never knew I deserved. My name is Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, I felt like a ghost in my own home. I started counting down the days until my 21st birthday when I was just 19, not because I was eager for adulthood, but because I knew it was my ticket out. From the outside, our house was picture perfect. White shutters, a sprawling oak tree. But inside, it felt like I was constantly holding my breath, an unwelcome guest in a place that didn't want me. My younger brother, Luke, he was the golden boy. And I don't mean that in some petty, older brother way. I mean, he could total the family car into the mailbox, and my parents would rush to ask if he was okay.
Me?
I once forgot to vacuum before dinner and got grounded for a week. So I learned to be quiet, to be small, to never give them an excuse to be angry. When I walked into a room, my dad's voice would tighten, clipped, as if I were some problem he couldn't solve.
My mom, she didn't yell.
She had this way of looking straight through me, like I was someone else's kid who'd wandered into the wrong house. Luke, on the other hand, effortless charm, that easy grin. He was a miracle baby, you see, after my mom had several miscarriages. He was the one who made it. I think my parents decided right then and there that he was special, and everything else just faded away. Still, I tried. I got decent grades, stayed out of trouble. I even worked part-time, stacking shelves at the grocery store, saving for college because I knew they wouldn't help. Whenever I brought up my future, my dad would just grunt. You're smart. You'll figure it out. But Luke? Oh, Luke got a brand new laptop for his 16th birthday because he needed it for school, even though he spent most of his time gaming and scrolling TikTok. I remember asking my mom if I could borrow it once for college applications. She just said, ask your brother. He said no. So, by the time my 21st birthday finally rolled around, I wasn't expecting anything grand. Maybe a card, a family dinner. Honestly, I didn't even expect a present. I don't know, I needed a minute. A moment for them to see me, to acknowledge that I'd survived 21 years in a house that barely tolerated my presence. My birthday was a Saturday that year. I woke up late, came downstairs, half expecting a happy birthday, Ethan. Instead, I found my dad in the kitchen, meticulously tying a bow around a sleek black box. And Luke? He was practically bouncing on his heels like a kid on Christmas morning. I just stood there, drowsy, watching their little interaction, feeling like I was intruding in my own home. My mom finally smiled and said, perfect timing. Come on, Luke. Open it. Nobody, and I mean nobody, looked at me. They didn't even seem to notice I hadn't spoken a word. Luke ripped open the package and let out this exaggerated gasp, like he'd won the lottery. Inside was a beautiful, expensive-looking silver watch with a leather band and Roman numerals. Oh my God, Dad. This is sick, he crowed, slipping it onto his wrist. Now I don't need to borrow your old one. My dad chuckled, ruffling his hair. Well, you deserve it, son. You've been working so hard recently. Hard? The kid's biggest achievement that week was reaching second base with a girl from his chemistry class. I just stood there, frozen, hoping someone would remember why this day was important. Finally, my mom glanced at me. Ethan, don't look so bitter.
It's not always about gifts.
When you get older, you'll realize what matters is who you become, not what you get. It hit me like a physical slap. She said it in that calm, condescending tone she used when she wanted to sound intelligent, as if I was the greedy, ungrateful child. I tried to nod along, but my throat closed up. I thought we were having cake. I managed to murmur. Oh, we did already, Luke said, totally nonchalant. While you were asleep. While I was asleep. They had cake without me? My mom quickly chimed in. It was just a small thing. Nothing major. But I wasn't letting it go. Whose name was on it? The silence stretched, just a beat too long. Then Luke smirked.
Mine?
I mean, it was a cooperative effort, but it's not your birthday. My dad barked. Don't be dramatic. It's only a cake. I wanted to scream.
I wanted to smash something. Instead, I laughed.
It was a harsh, short sound, utterly unlike me. I laughed because if I didn't, I would have broken down right there, and I refused to give them the satisfaction. Luke raised an eyebrow, looking at me like I was the crazy one. My mom just gave me this sorrowful, despairing look, as if I had single-handedly ruined a perfectly good day. That night, I walked up to my room and didn't even bother turning on the light. I sat on my bed for what felt like an eternity, staring at the floor, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. The thought echoed in my head, a cold, hard truth. They're never going to love you the way you want them to. It doesn't matter what you do.
It doesn't matter how hard you try.
You're never going to be Luke. That was it. I finally decided. I grabbed my backpack and threw in a hoodie, a water bottle, a couple of granola bars, and the $50 I'd been squirreling away in an envelope in my sock drawer. I didn't have a plan, not really. But I had my ID, a phone charger, and a bus timetable I'd secretly printed from the library weeks earlier. At midnight, when the house was silent and everyone was asleep, I snuck out the back door. I didn't look back. I thought maybe I'd be gone for a day or two. Crash at the church shelter downtown, find some odd jobs, couch surf if I could find a kind soul. I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't stay. What I didn't expect was 2 weeks later, my phone would ring, an unfamiliar number. It was my dad. I let it ring the first 2 times. On the third, I answered. Before I could say anything, his voice broke through, choked up, barely a whisper. Your room's still here, he pleaded. Please come back. Just tell me where you are. Please. I sensed something had changed, but I wasn't sure what or why. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back. I didn't go back. Not that week, not the next, and not after he left another voicemail, quieter and angrier this time. I don't know what you think you're proving, Ethan, but this isn't how family works. You don't just vanish. That line actually made me chuckle, a bitter, hollow sound. Ironic, considering I'd spent my entire life feeling like a ghost in that mansion. I stayed gone. I bounced around. First the church shelter, then this tiny room for rent with Lynn, a retired mechanic. He was a gruff old man with a soft spot for strays, both dogs and humans. I gave him what I could afford. $130 a week for a mattress in a corner of his garage, walled off with plywood and curtains. It smelled of grease and iron, but it was warm. And for the first time, I didn't have to follow someone else's rules to exist. I got a part-time job unloading trucks at a shipping warehouse and spent every other waking moment at the public library, filling out college applications on computers that timed out every 30 minutes. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I didn't want them to find me until I had something to show for myself. But of course, they eventually did. It was Luke who showed up first. I was leaving the library one afternoon when I spotted him leaning against a car that was definitely too nice for him. A brand new model, sleek black paint, leather seats. He hadn't noticed me yet, just scrolling on his phone, looking bored. My first instinct was to turn and run, but curiosity held me in place. A second later, he saw me and smirked, like I was late for some event I hadn't been invited to. There you are, he said, sliding his phone into his jacket. You look like crap, bro.
Thanks, I deadpanned.
Seriously though, Mom's freaking out. Dad's being weird. You made your point. Okay, come home. I'm not coming home. He looked surprised.
Come on, man.
You had your little tantrum. Now, everyone's waiting for you to crawl back so things can go back to normal. The word normal hit me like a brick. You mean, where my birthday cake had your name on it? I demanded. That kind of normal? He shrugged, like I was talking about the weather. It was just a mix-up. You always take things so seriously. They didn't mean anything by it. You're right, I told him, my voice dangerously calm. They never mean anything by it. That's the problem. His smile faded. Look, I don't know what kind of sob story you're telling yourself, but you're not the only one with problems, okay? You don't see me running away. No, I countered. You just see the world bending over backward to make sure you don't have to. That stung him. His jaw stiffened. Whatever. Just know that when you finally come back, don't expect a parade. They've been bending over backward trying to reach you. I nodded slowly.
Yeah.
Did they tell you what they said the night I left? He didn't answer. I hadn't expected him to. Tell them I'm fine, I said, already turning away. And if they're really so worried, they can stop calling my number and start thinking about why I stopped picking up. After a week or two, their calls and texts dwindled. I figured they'd given up, probably converted my bedroom into a storage space or a mini home gym, whatever project they could think of to fill the silence. I thought that was the end of it. Then I got an email. Not from my parents, but from my high school counselor, Mrs. Duro. It was brief, awkwardly formal, like she wasn't sure whether to be worried or polite. She hoped I was safe and well, but she needed to inform me that my transcripts had been requested and revoked. According to their system, my parents had called the school, stating I wouldn't be attending college, and all further application communication should be canceled. I sat there in the library, staring at the screen, unable to breathe. I read it again, then a third time. They tried to eliminate me. My pulse hammered. I called the school immediately, and thankfully, Mrs. Duro answered. I explained everything. She confirmed it with an apology, though it was clear she hadn't heard the whole story. I spent the next 2 days untangling the mess, ensuring my applications weren't damaged. Several deadlines had already passed. I'd missed out on a scholarship offer I had a real shot at. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying that email in my head, thinking, what kind of people go out of their way to stifle their own child's potential? This wasn't about control anymore. This was sabotage. I didn't want vengeance.
Not yet.
What I wanted was to disappear so completely from their story that one day, they'd have to explain to someone why their firstborn son never came home. But fate, it seemed, had other ideas. Because 1 month later, I received a letter in the mail. A real, physical letter, paper and envelope, no return address, just my name written in my father's familiar hand. Inside, there was no apology.
Just a list.
A genuine, bullet-pointed list of things I had to complete before we could speak about you returning home. It had gems like, stop blaming others for your unhappiness. Apologize for walking out and ghosting your family. Recognize the sacrifices we made for you. Understand that we do what we do out of love. I read it silently. Then I laughed. What else could I do? It wasn't a letter. It was a contract. Another way to make me the problem, a technique to lure me back into their cycle of guilt, obligation, and performance. I crumpled it, tossed it in the garbage, and told myself for the umpteenth time that I was done. But then came a moment that altered everything. It happened in early spring. I'd started working longer hours at the warehouse, saving every penny for community college. One evening, Lynn walked into the garage with a heavy packet. He said someone had stopped by earlier, asked if Ethan lived here, and just handed it over without a word. I opened it carefully. Inside was an official legal letter from a lawyer's office. It stated that I was being removed as a dependent from my parents' tax records, retrospectively. I was no longer considered a member of their household, and I had until the end of the month to retrieve any remaining personal belongings from their property before it would be disposed of at the homeowner's discretion. There was a sticky note attached. The only thing it said was, "This is what consequences look like. Sign, Mom." That was the switch. I felt something inside me stiffen, solidify. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. They weren't just trying to hurt me. They were trying to eradicate me. And if they wanted to play that game, they had no idea who they were up against. I didn't speak for 2 days after that letter. Lynn noticed. He didn't press me. He just passed an extra sandwich across the workbench at lunch and said, "Whatever it is, kid, it won't last forever. Not if you don't let it." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. Rock bottom doesn't always look like a catastrophic fall. Sometimes it's just a silent, deep ache that settles in your chest and never goes away. It's coming home from a double shift, fingers aching, boots drenched, and realizing you don't have a house, only a garage with no insulation and a curtain for privacy. It's sitting in a cold room at 3 a.m., hoodie pulled over your face, realizing your family has written you off as a bad investment. They weren't quite finished with me. They punished me for leaving. I didn't even have anything to return for. A few clothes, a shelf of books I'd accumulated over the years, my guitar, if it hadn't already been sold or discarded. But even so, I felt hollow, knowing that my name, my space, my very existence in that house was being washed clean, as if I were a blemish on their flawless family image. Worst of all, I nearly broke. That week, I skipped 2 shifts. I didn't respond when Lynn knocked. I didn't check my email, or eat much or sleep. I just lay there, listening to the wind howl against the garage door, wondering what I was even doing anymore. But then, something silly rescued me.
A book.
Not just any book. My book. I thought I'd lost it during the move, but it was buried at the bottom of my rucksack, a dog-eared copy of Jon Krakauer's Into the Wild. I'd read it 3 times before. But that night, I flicked it open and came across a statement I'd marked in red ink years earlier. Happiness is only real when shared. It should have made me feel worse. Instead, it made me sit up. I realized I was trying to share my life with people who didn't want it. I kept sending out bits of myself, hoping someone would say, "We see you. You matter." But they never did. That wasn't the family I was born into, and I couldn't change them. I could only change myself. The next morning, I went back to work. I apologized to my boss for missing shifts and volunteered to take the graveyard position for the next 2 weeks to make up for it. He didn't ask any questions, just grunted and handed me a badge for the night crew. The work was harder, heavier boxes, colder nights, but I didn't mind. I needed it. That was the start of my reconstruction. Quiet, uncomplicated, and mine. Over the next 6 months, I settled into a groove. Wake up, work, read, sleep, repeat. I started saving every extra dollar. I downloaded budgeting apps, cut out every superfluous expense, even stopped using mobile data to save on my phone bill. Lynn noticed and started assigning me more chores, giving me credit toward rent. Sometimes he'd slip me a 20 and say it was for groceries, as if I hadn't just cleaned his entire vehicle engine. I applied to community college again, this time without any help from my parents, and paid the application fee myself. I cried after submitting a brutally honest essay. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I wrote about growing up unseen, how silence can speak louder than words, and how you can create yourself from scratch when no one gives you the tools. Things slowly began to change. One night, while scrubbing the warehouse floor, I overheard 2 logistics employees grumbling about a shipment software error. I'd picked up a little coding from an online course, nothing major, just a free Python class. But I offered a solution anyway. They dismissed it at first, but 2 days later, one of them pulled me aside and said, "Hey, that thing you mentioned? It worked." Before I knew it, I was unofficially the go-to guy when computers crashed or printers went berserk. I didn't get a promotion or a title, but people started remembering my name, thanking me, seeing me. It was a strange feeling, the kind that makes you sit with it for a while and think, maybe I'm not just background noise. My first significant triumph came in early summer. I got an email from the community college. Accepted. With a scholarship, too. Not a full ride, but enough to cover tuition if I kept working part-time. I remember looking at the screen, repeating the word congrats, over and over, as if it might vanish if I blinked too hard. Lynn let me use his kitchen that night to bake a packaged cake. It turned out lopsided and a little scorched, but I didn't care. I used blue icing to write my name on it. Ethan. Just Ethan. There was no communal celebration, no forgotten candle, no lecture. It was just me. And a dilapidated garage was the first thing I'd ever made truly with my own hands. I didn't call my parents. I didn't tell them. But I figured they'd find out eventually because people talk, especially in our town. And sure enough, one day at the grocery store, I ran into an old neighbor, Mrs. Langford, a sweet lady who used to slip me cookies when my mother wasn't looking. When she spotted me, her face lit up. "Ethan, I heard you're going to college. Your mom must be so proud." I just nodded and mumbled, "Yeah, she must be." But I knew otherwise. They weren't proud. They were probably annoyed that I'd done it without them. And I was fine with that because their approval was no longer the currency I needed. Later that week, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mother.
She didn't cry. She didn't shout.
She just said, "We heard about school. I'm glad you're doing well. And I hope you remember where you came from." I played that message 5 times, like a stray dog being called back to its kennel. But I didn't feel angry. I felt liberated. By the end of the summer, I moved out of Lynn's garage. I found a shared apartment near campus with 2 housemates who kept to themselves and didn't ask questions. I started classes and landed a part-time IT position at the school's help desk. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And gradually, brick by brick, I started to build something resembling a life. I still had emotional wounds. I still cringed whenever people raised their voices. Still questioned compliments. Still found myself apologizing for taking up space. But I was learning. Healing isn't loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as having coffee in a quiet room and realizing you're no longer afraid to be noticed. One night, I opened a fresh notebook and jotted down a list of realities, things I'd learned, things no one could take from me. At the top, I wrote, "You don't need permission to be someone they never imagined." And under it, "Your worth isn't measured by someone else's disappointment. You can start over, even when they say you can't. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who roots for you in the quiet." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and slept better than I had in years. But I should have known it wasn't over. Because just when I thought I was finally free, something happened that pulled me right back in. It started with a message request. Late one night, I was reviewing notes for an upcoming midterm, sitting on my apartment floor with a half-eaten burrito and 3 open tabs on laptop troubleshooting. It was from Mrs. Langford, my parents' old neighbor. The one with a garden that used to spill into our backyard, always kind, but distant, friendly in that suburban way. I hadn't used Facebook in months, if not longer, only keeping the account open for emergencies or identity verification. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and the message was simple. "Hey, Ethan. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I thought you had the right to know. Your parents listed your childhood home for sale. The sign just went up this week. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message, then reread it. The house was up for sale. Our house. For a second, I didn't feel anything, just blankness. Then something flickered. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, but something else. Something sharper, colder. I'd always assumed they'd sell eventually, that once Luke graduated or moved out, they'd downsize or relocate to some gated community with a HOA newsletter. But the fact that it was now, after everything, after cutting me off, after pretending I never existed, something about the timing didn't feel right. So, I did what any reasonably curious person would do. I opened Zillow. It didn't take long to find the listing, a bright, overexposed photo of our front porch. The white shutters were cleaned up. The old oak tree still cast a crooked shadow across the lawn. The description was flowery and fake, a charming family home with rich character, lovingly maintained for over 2 decades, featuring 4 bedrooms, custom finishes, and a quiet neighborhood. I scrolled through the photos: living room, kitchen, master bedroom. Then bedroom 1. I clicked. My breath caught. They turned my room into a guest suite. Neutral walls, beige bedding, generic art prints. Every trace of me was gone. No posters, no desk, no shelves. No indication that someone had spent 18 years growing up in that space. As if I'd never existed. They didn't just push me out, they erased me. That's when the idea began to form. That weekend, I borrowed a collared shirt from my roommate, printed a fake pre-approval letter using a free online template, and booked a tour through the real estate site using a burner Gmail. I wasn't looking for vengeance, not yet. Just curiosity. I didn't know what I was expecting when I pulled up to the curb in a borrowed car. Maybe a rush of emotion, nostalgia, bitterness. But mostly I just felt numb. The porch creaked like it used to, and the front door still had the scratch near the bottom where I'd once tried to sneak in a stray cat. The real estate agent, A perky woman named Sasha with blindingly white teeth had no idea she was walking through a landmine. "So, the sellers are really motivated," she chirped, looking for a quick close. "They've already moved most of their personal belongings out, looking to downsize now that their youngest is off to college." I nodded politely, letting her guide me from room to room. I barely listened. My focus was on the walls, the spaces, the energy, and the gaping absence of me. When we got to the backyard, I paused. The fence was newer. Luke must have helped build it, or at least posed for a photo, while someone else did. The treehouse I'd built with my uncle when I was 12 and still had hope?
Gone.
Ripped down. "I'll give you a minute," Sasha said, sensing something in my silence. I nodded and walked toward the back fence, keeping my hands in my pockets to stop them from shaking. That night, I sat in my car long after the engine had cooled down, and I knew it wasn't just curiosity anymore.
It was war.
They wanted to pretend I never existed?
Fine.
Then I'd make sure the world knew exactly who I was, and that they were the ones who lost me. I didn't want to burn down the house. That would have been too easy, too fast. I wanted something slower, smarter, more permanent. So I began planning. The first step was research. I spent the next week looking into property records, who owned the house, and what their finances were like. Using a few publicly available databases, I discovered something interesting. The mortgage wasn't paid off, and they were a few months behind, which raised some serious questions about why they were selling. I filed that information away. Next, I called Milo, an old high school classmate who used to run the tech club and now freelanced in cybersecurity. We weren't close, but I knew two things about him. He hated bullies, and he owed me a favor from years ago when I covered for him during a plagiarism accusation. We met for coffee, and I laid out a version of the story. Not the entire thing, but the main points. "What do you need?" he asked. "I need access to the real estate records, possible seller disclosures, any correspondence I can find. I want to know what they're concealing." Milo cracked his knuckles. "Give me 48 hours. He finished in 36. My parents had listed the house without disclosing a major plumbing issue that had started in the basement, which would cost thousands to fix. The documents were forged. Not just misleading, but illegal. I saved every file, printed copies, and uploaded backups to encrypted cloud storage. The evidence was there, but I didn't want to blow it all at once. In the meantime, I contacted the college administration office to confirm something I'd been quietly working on for months. I was eligible to transfer into a full scholarship program due to my GPA and work-study contributions. And they invited me to speak at the fall orientation as a first-generation student. That's when the idea struck me.
What if I invited them?
Not directly, of course. But what if they saw me standing on a stage, holding a scholarship certificate, announced to an audience as someone they'd given up on? And what if, right around that same time, the buyers for their house backed out and someone reported their fraudulent documents? What if everything they'd built their image on started to crack? Not because I screamed, but because I succeeded, because I smiled, and then made it clear that they were never part of the journey. That was the setup. And I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. A name, Luke. He was still their golden boy, their pride and joy. But I knew things about him they didn't. Old screenshots, messages he sent from his school-issued iPad when he was 17, joking about borrowing money from my father's wallet and blaming the maid. Comments about not completing community service hours and having a friend sign attendance forms. Minor stuff until it was packaged together and handed to a college admissions committee. I hadn't used any of it yet, but I would if they pushed. Because I didn't need to ruin their lives. I just needed them to watch me build mine without them. Brick by brick.
Speech by speech.
And then, when the moment was right, I dropped the match. Quiet. Controlled. Undeniable. And walked away. Not bitter. Not broken. Just free. I didn't want the ending to be loud, not a scene, not a tantrum, but quiet, measured, like placing the final stone on a grave. And that's exactly how it turned out. The first domino to fall was the house sale. I carefully timed everything, waiting until the buyers had gone through inspection, financing, all the drawn-out steps. And then I sent them a small, anonymous package via a third-party forwarding service that guaranteed no return address. The flash drive contained images of the basement flooding caused by the old sump pump, screenshots of the fraudulent disclosure paperwork, and a penned message that said, "This house has a secret." The sellers did not repair it. Instead, they covered it up. If you sign the contract, the problem is yours. Think twice. Ask the agent about the sump pump and watch what happens. The consequences were immediate. My parents, already behind on their mortgage, were about to face foreclosure if they couldn't find a new buyer in time. But they couldn't fudge the paperwork this time because the plumbing issue had been legally and publicly flagged. 3 days later, the house disappeared from Zillow. The listing went dark. I didn't even have to lift a finger after that. I just watched. Meanwhile, I said yes to the orientation speech. The school had even arranged for a local news crew to film parts of it for a segment on community success stories. I didn't expect it to be a big deal, just a 5-minute slot on a sleepy Sunday newscast. But what I didn't anticipate was the article. A few days after the orientation, someone from the City College Board contacted me and asked if they could publish my story on their website. I said yes, expecting a paragraph, but they ran a complete profile, photo, interview, everything. From dorm to dean's list, Ethan Lane's journey from abandonment to academic triumph. It was a little too dramatic, to be honest, but it was real. And it spread. People shared it. Old classmates, teachers, neighbors. And eventually my parents. I found out through a secondhand Facebook comment that someone screenshotted and texted to me. This article is filled with exaggerations. Some kids just don't appreciate how much their family sacrifices for them, my mother had written. Passive-aggressive, anonymous enough to seem inconspicuous, but unmistakably hers. She was spinning. And I wasn't done yet. Because Luke, the golden child, had just begun applying to transfer institutions. And I still had those screenshots. I didn't want to ruin his future, but I did want to send a warning shot. So I sent a short, anonymous email to the admissions office of the school he was aiming for. Just a few lines about falsified community service records, a suspicious paper trail of attendance forms, and a history of academic oversights. I attached 3 old screenshots of him joking about it. I signed it. For the integrity of your academic program. It didn't matter if they acted on it or not. What mattered was that Luke would meet someone new and never feel untouchable again. Now, here's what I didn't expect. They came to me separately, rather than together. First, it was my father, who showed up at the university assistant's desk one Tuesday morning, eyes bloodshot, tie loose, face weary. "Ethan," he started, "we need to talk." I gazed at him, calmly, steadily. "You mean, now that the house is unsellable and Luke's applications are falling apart?" I said quietly. He blinked, like he hadn't expected me to acknowledge it. "We didn't know it had gotten this bad," he told me. "You've made your point, okay? We get it." "No," I said. "You don't. That's how it got this far." He tried again. "We can fix it. Maybe come home? Let's talk this through." I smiled, a little chilly.
"There's no home," I said.
"You burned that bridge and sold the ashes." Then I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. 2 weeks later, my mother sent me a letter. No envelope, just a piece of paper slid under my apartment door in the middle of the night. "Ethan, I realize now that we made mistakes, but you're being harsh. Punishing us like this doesn't make you better than us. Please, this is your family."
"Mom."
I didn't answer. Instead, I tried something different. I emailed her a simple snapshot. Me, standing in front of the college banner, holding my scholarship award, smiling. I added on the back, "This is what consequences look like." That was the last communication I ever sent to them. Since then, the house has been foreclosed on. Luke transferred, but not to the school he preferred. And my parents relocated to a smaller, older rental house 2 counties away, with a lawn they don't post pictures of. I, for one, am doing well. Graduated with honors. I started working with a group that assists first-generation kids in navigating college without the support of their families. I mentor children who feel invisible just like I did. I have a new apartment, a puppy, a full fridge, and friends who have chosen me. And I've never had to look back.
My vengeance wasn't loud.
It didn't come with slamming doors or shouting battles. It arrived with silent breezes, inexorable progress, and the kind of success you build brick by brick while everyone else is looking for a collapse. The best part? They'll spend the rest of their lives pretending they didn't lose a son, while I'll spend the rest of mine never needing them again. I wasn't the disappointment in that house. I was the escape artist they never noticed. So, I have to ask you if you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated by the people who were supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to build your own family from scratch? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
I really want to hear what you think.